Hi, everybody. Good morning. Welcome. I'm always excited to be here, but I'm especially excited because of the topic we are going to be discussing today in honor of Yom Yerushalayim. Okay, I'm going to share my screen and we'll begin. When I decided on this topic 2 weeks ago, I've been involved in intense research about it. And really, a lucky thing is I joined a tour of the Old City yesterday. I like joining tours myself, even though I'm a tour guide, because you always learn something new. And the tour guide touched upon it. And then last night, one of my friends tells me, oh, there's a great Zoom online. Why don't you join? And it was the exact topic we're talking about today. So it's like, how perfect is that, except the lecture was late at night, so I fell asleep halfway, and that was fascinating. Anyway, with all that, let's begin. Let me share my screen with you. Okay. Jerusalem today, if you go to the Old City, you will probably see something like this: kids, people, restaurants, strollers. I know if I ever take groups that aren't Jewish, something they always comment, which I never thought of, but think is so beautiful. They always ask me, why there's so many kids? I'm like, what do you mean why there's so many kids? And it's really unique that in a place that has such history, that a tourist site should have people living there. And then when I went to Rome a few years ago, I realized why they asked, because I didn't see a single child. So this is the Old City of Jerusalem, and it's really pretty today. I don't think there's a single tourist that comes to Israel that does not stop here. I know a few years ago, I was a counselor in a summer program called iLead, and it's 3 weeks. They're in Israel for 5 weeks, and it's 3 weeks until we go to Jerusalem, or maybe 4 weeks. And the entire time, we don't feel like we're in Israel. When are we going to the Kotel? When are we going to the Old City? Because people really define Israel as Jerusalem, and even more so as the Old City. And here is a street in the Old City. We see the flowers, how pretty, and you see it's pretty narrow, but renovated. And what I want to discuss today, so here, let me go back a minute. Something well known, and especially with the Yom Yerushalayim coming up, what are we celebrating? The reunification of Jerusalem. It's known that for 19 years, in between the War of Independence and the Six-Day War, we could not go to the Old City. It was in Jordanian hands. And what I want to talk about today is, how did that happen? How did we lose control of the Rova? 200 years ago, if you look at where the Jews are living in Israel, they're living in the 4 holy cities, and most of them are living in Jerusalem. So how did it happen all of a sudden that there's no more Jews in the Rova after 1948? So that's going to be the topic. What were the factors that led to the fall of the Rova? Now, when I say Rova, it's a Hebrew word meaning quarter. So we're going to be talking about the Jewish quarter. So what led to it to fall? What happened all of a sudden that there's no more Jewish quarter? Who were some key players in the fight? And what happened next? Okay, the Rova falls, now what? Now, the next what happened, we know, because thank God we could go to the Jerusalem today, go to the Old City, walk around. So we know it has a very happy ending, but what happened before that? So it's really kind of a depressing topic to talk about, but I think that when we know the sad parts and what happened, and it's part of our history, the Jewish history has a lot of painful parts though, I think we could appreciate way more the happiness of it and the happiness of Yom Yerushalayim. And I think you'll go into Yom Yerushalayim with a new understanding, knowing all the background of what happened before. And of course, to discover a new place in Israel. I'm sure you've all been in the Old City. There's the Old City you could go to so many times. In my tour guiding course, I must have went 7 times, and each day, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. we focused on a different time period. So I'm going to point out a few areas in the Old City that maybe you weren't familiar with before. And the higher goal is, how can we increase our love and appreciation for Jerusalem and for those people that protected it? And I think learning about this will make you love Yerushalayim even more. November 29th, 1947, everyone is sitting around their radio and they're hearing the UN vote for the creation of Israel. 33 were in favor, 13 against, 10 abstained. And very famous pictures of the Jews going out in the streets and dancing, so happy we're going to have a state. But what happened the day after is what began the War of Independence. Now, there were 2 halves of the War of Independence. there was this half where the Arabs that are in Israel are attacking the Jews because, hey, we don't want them to have a state. And then the second half, which was after Ben Gurion declared the state of Israel, then the armies from other countries attacked as well. But it really started the day after the UN declared its independence. And what happened? The fighting began. And in the old city, the Jews and Arabs who were living friendly, not always friendly, there were always the fights, but for the most part, they were living close. All of a sudden, there's attacks. And here is a picture of convoys that are coming to Jerusalem to give Jerusalem supplies. Now, the old city had a double challenge because Jerusalem, they call it in Hebrew, was in a matzor, it was in a siege, meaning no one could just walk freely in Jerusalem because the only way to get there, which is Highway 1, the Arabs are watching over, and any car that comes, they shoot them, and they shoot these convoys, these armored vehicles as well. But if they don't try to get to Jerusalem, then the people are all going to die. And Jerusalem in 1948, it's people living within the walls of the old city, and it's people living in the new city. So it's both. So the people in the new city, obviously, you could get to them easier. And the people in the old city, it's even harder because there's walls around them. So now once you get to the old city, you have to get through the walls. So it was even more difficult. And the people in the old city were dependent on help from people outside. Now, there was a man, his name was Abraham Halpern, and he saw the situation in the old city. Now, something I must add is the amount of Jews living in the old city at that time in 1948 was about 2,000. Where'd they all go? A little bit later, I'm going to show you just a comparison of numbers over the years. In 1860, the Jews decided we want to go out of the old city because we want fresh air, we want cleanliness, we want bigger houses. And there was this mass movement outside the old city walls. And every year it increased and increased and increased and increased. And the people now that are living in the old city, it's the poor people that can't afford to live anywhere else. The conditions are horrible. There's no sanitation. And Abraham Halpern, he sees the situation and he says, I need to take control of it. I need to do something. And he organizes the people. And he says, children go to school up until age 8. From 8 and on, they're helping in the war effort. And he said, the old people, you can say Tehillim, that's how you could help. And he really tried to create an organized life for people because he knows if you're sitting home doing nothing, that's what creates a lot of unrest. And March 3rd, 1948, the British arrest him. And he didn't do anything wrong that they arrested him for, but he doesn't need to do something wrong for them to arrest him. The British are still here, and he leaves the old city, and he can't get back in because what the British decided is the only people that could come in the old city are doctors or nurses or teachers, and he wasn't even a resident of the old city. And in his place, a man named Moshe Rusnak, who is 24 years old, he's given the command. Now, Moshe Rusnak, he has no experience at all fighting. He didn't want the job. They just gave it to him. And he says, okay, in a week, someone will replace me. And a week goes by, and another week, and another week, and another week. And he's holding his position for months. Now, remember his name, and I'm going to mention him a few times because he's going to be very significant. This is him in 2003. He looks such a cute little old man. So this is him, and we're going to bring him up again. So he's in charge, and like I said, no experience, 24 years old. What are some of the challenges of fighting in the old city? One, the alleyways are very narrow. If you look at this picture here, this is modern day, but notice this little golf cart, because a car can't fit here. You see, there's 2 people walking, so how many people could be across? And back then it was even more narrow. So it's very, very narrow, and you have to fight. So where are you walking? You can't even walk. So that's one huge challenge. 2, it's very crowded because the houses are small and all the families are together. There's a lot of, most of the people there were old and children, and they can't really help with the war. And you want to be careful that they're not going to get hurt. It's dirty, which it's never easy when you're walking over piles of garbage. There's a lot of houses and shuls, so you want to make sure that civilians don't get hurt. And the shuls, you don't want shuls to get blown up or shot. And Jerusalem is a symbol for the nation of Israel, for the whole world, the holy sites. So you have to be careful too. The soldiers were not trained. A lot of them didn't know how to use a gun. They were just given a gun and said, here, go fight. I thought I had another one. Okay. And the Jews can't get the supplies that they need. So as time is going on, the amount of medicine is declining. the food, whatever they need, they can't get. So numbers I mentioned earlier, just for comparison, in 1900, in the old city, which is in the walls, there were 15,000 Jews, and in 1948, there were only 1,600. So it's a huge decline. And when the War of Independence started, the Jews that could leave the old city left, but most of them couldn't afford to leave. So really, the old city, it's important to keep this in mind because we see from the numbers that the Rova, the old city, has been on a decline for years. It didn't happen overnight. All of a sudden, there's no one there. Slowly, people are leaving. The opposite is today. For someone to get an apartment in the old city is very tough, but there are not a lot of Jews there. And of the 1,600 Jews, there are only 130 people that are fighting. So that is not a large amount at all. And of course, the Arabs have an unlimited supply of weapons. The British leave on, so I wrote May 14th, it's May 15th, 1948. And until they do, whose side are they on? They're supposed to keep the peace. However, are they really neutral? So sometimes they would be on the side of the Jews. Sometimes they'd be on the side of the Arabs. Mostly they were on the side of the Arabs. And there were these strongholds. Over here is a British soldier. And they're watching, trying to help, not really helping. And it's hard for the Jews to do what they need if the British are there. Right after the British left, the Jews immediately took the post that they could. But them there did not help things at all. I want to show you an example of what does it mean when we say stronghold. So this archway, you could pass under it, and I'm sure you passed under it in the old city today. The nickname is Emdat Lubinsky, which was a family that lived there. So it's a little bit hard to picture because it's built up today, you see with the apartments and the windows. But on top of this archway, you had the Jews just lying there, lying on top. And it wasn't these, so now to the right, to compare, here is a modern day fortification. You see it's cement, you can't blow it up easily. There's little holes to see through and to shoot through. But the Jews there, what the fighters say, what it was like, they said we had maybe a stronghold in a bedroom or on a balcony or behind a store. And they said sometimes the Arab strongholds were directly across from us. A lot of times you can't see until the Arabs are right next to you. You want to be careful, you're not going to shoot a person by accident. And the communication back then, they didn't have cell phones, they didn't have walkie-talkies. So how do you communicate between one post and another? So that's where the children got involved, and children as young as 8 were helping. The children were very quick and small, and they'd run from one stronghold to run one post to another post and pass messages along, pass notes, give food. Everybody helped, women helped as well. And they weren't officially, they didn't know how to fight, but everyone needed to help to make sure that the Rova would stand and not fall. And here's a picture of people with weapons. Now, so they didn't have enough weapons and they ran out of grenades. So they had to make grenades on their own. And they were told one day, collect nails and pieces of broken glass, whatever you can, we'll make our own grenades. And one of the fighters from 1948, he says that his son was a paratrooper, like years later in the modern Israeli army. And he asked his son, how many bullets did you use today in practice, in one practice? And he said his son used more bullets in one practice than he did in the entire War of Independence, because he said we couldn't waste bullets. We couldn't just shoot. We could only shoot if there was an Arab in front of us and we were threatened. We can't just waste anything. So they really, really had to be careful with what they had. Now, the Jews, the situation is getting worse and worse and worse. People are dying. They don't know what to do. And Israel itself is pretty busy. They just declared their independence and there's a war and all ends. And then something amazing happens. The night of May 18th, in between the May 18th and May 19th, a group of fighters called the Palmach, they enter the city, the old city of Jerusalem, through this gate. This is Sha'ar Tzion, and you see there's a lot of bullet holes. The bullet holes in the wall are from 1948 and 1967, were Jordanian snipers, and anytime a Jew saw a Jordanian sniper, he'd shoot. So that's what it's from. A side note, so the Palmach is entering, and how do the Jews feel? They say, yay, Jerusalem is safe, the Geulah is come. Moshe Rusnak, he says, we felt like we were given a new chance at life. Finally, we have backup from the Israeli army. And one of the fighters, he says that I see the Palmach soldiers entering, there were 24 men and 2 women soldiers. So first of all, it's not a large amount. And he says, I look at their eyes and their eyes are all red. And I said, why are your eyes all red? And they said, they're all red because we haven't slept in 3 days. Now, the people in Jerusalem are so excited. Finally, they're saved. They have another chance. But a few hours later, the soldiers all leave. They were given a command, you need to go somewhere else. And you could imagine the desperation and the pain, the anger of the Jews that they think they're being saved, and then the Palmach just leaves and does nothing to help. Now, which side are we on? So I'll take the more positive side. The Palmach soldiers, they were already overtired, not sleeping. Israel was fighting for its independence. There's a lot of places that need help. They were given a command to bring some supplies, but they were never really given the command to fight and help take over. And they left because they had to go somewhere else. And anywhere they're fighting, I'm sure needs the help. So that you could say on one side. And you could say on the other side, how could they do that? How could they leave the old city? They have a chance to save the people. How could the commanders of the Palmach give them an order to leave? Do they not care about the old city? They know the old city is going to fall. And you have also Moshe Rusnak said, my instructions that I was given was do not surrender. No matter what you do, don't surrender. And I was constantly being given promises. Help is coming, help is coming, help is coming. He said all these promises were empty. Nobody came. And then when people came, they left. So the people in the old city, what they say is we really felt like nobody cared about us. They just said, the old city, whatever happens, happens. We don't really care. We can't bother fighting for them. And that is really, really what they felt. And they felt that way for many years to come. And maybe they're right. Maybe it was, because you could say if the old city really was that important, then send people to fight. So you can take either side, but they left. So why did they leave? Well, we said why they left. They were given the command to leave, and there's other places that need help, but it's so painful for the Jews. Their hope was taken away. Now, when you go inside Sha'ar Tzion, you'll see this memorial stone. Oh, not memorial really, because they didn't die, but this honorary stone that says we want to honor the fighters of the Palmach that entered on May 18th, and they were very brave. I remember I was passing through this gate with another tour guide, and the tour guide said, this sign is a lie. They were not brave. They didn't do anything. That was the perspective he took. And then another person could say they were already overtired and overworked, and they did what they could. Take whichever one you want, but this is a sign that's there that reminds us of that history. So that was something really disappointing. Now, the Jews are losing. They just are, for all the reasons we named earlier of not having enough fighters, weapons, trained people. So what do? They slowly need to get in closer and closer and closer, and the Arabs are taking over the strong points. There's something, a beautiful tour you can take today, the 4 Sephardic synagogues in the Old City, and all the Jews gather inside. Now, if you gather a lot of people, we said about 1,600 people, inside a small closed area, and you cook there, and you go to the bathroom there, and you do everything there, you can imagine how bad the smell would be and how hard the conditions are. And these are the conditions that people are living under. Now, what are their options? They could continue fighting, or they could surrender. The command Moshe Rusnak was given was do not surrender under any circumstance. But he sees the people, the women and the children and the old men, and he knows that we can't hold it out anymore. And what a fateful decision he has to make. 24 years old, he needs to make this fateful decision for the lives of the entire people. And so here's a picture of, not from then, because you see everyone's all happy in there. This is I think it was from a swearing in ceremony of the Sephardic chief rabbis in Israel they used to do inside of one of the shuls. So that's what the picture is, but just so you get a sense, you have all these people crowded inside. And what happens on May 17th, 1948? So pause for a second. If you see this shul in the old city, when you're walking on your way to the Kotel, you're going to get food, it's very, very prominent. So here we see the Golden Dome, Har HaBayit, and here we see a shul. This is from the back. What is a shul? This shul is called the Chorva synagogue. Chorva, charev, lachriv means to destroy. So it's ironic that it's the synagogue of destruction because we see that it's built. But when it was first built in the 1700s, and then what happened is the Jews took out loans and they couldn't pay the Arabs back. So then in 1720, the Arabs destroyed it. They said, you can't pay us back, we're destroying it. And that's where it got the name the Chorva, the destruction. And then later on, it was rebuilt. And this synagogue was a symbol for the Jewish people. They were so proud. It was so high. And it looks like a really great place to build a fortification point. But the Jews didn't do it because, one, it's a shul and out of the respect for it. And two, because the house is too close by and they didn't want to, God forbid, kill someone. And all of a sudden, they hear this huge boom. And when the smoke clears, so May 27th, they said 17th. When the smoke clears, they understand that their beloved Chorva synagogue has been bombed. Here's a Jordanian standing among the ruins. Oh, I forgot to add something. When the Palmach leaves, they come in and then they leave a few hours later. Right away, a few hours later, the Jordanian army comes in. And this is another turning point because up until that point, the people fighting were unorganized Arabs. And now you have an army of a country coming in. So they led the way in. So here you have a Jordanian soldier. They were the ones that bombed the Chorva. So now the Jews, to remind you where they are. They're all crowded in the 4 Sephardic synagogues. And they now hear the sounds of the bombs from this shul of theirs that's such a symbol and representation. They decide, we want to surrender. It's the only chance we have. We can't continue fighting. And there were 2 rabbis, well, there were more than 2 rabbis, but the head rabbis, there was a Sephardic and Ashkenaz one. And here's a picture of Harav Hazan waving the white flag of surrender. So this was the Sephardic rabbi. He decides he wants to surrender. So he comes, him, and over here is the Ashkenaz rabbi, whose name is Rab Mintzberg. And they both come to the head of the Jordanian army, whose name is Abdullah Atal, and they say, we want to surrender. And he says, okay, it's nice you want to surrender, but you guys aren't fighters. Where is the head of your forces? Have him come and surrender. And in the meantime, they tell them, well, we need a collateral. We're not just going to let you go. We want to make sure you're really sending someone. So here, I want to tell a great story about Rab Mintzberg. He's sitting there with all the Arabs around him, and he has a book of halachot, and he's intensely concentrating and looking at it. And despite what's going on around him, and then one of the Jordanians tells Abdullah Atal, the head, he goes, there's no way this Jew could sit and concentrate so deeply when this is going on. It must be that he's cursing us. How else could he concentrate? So he goes to the rabbi and he says, what are you doing? And the rabbi says, well, it's Friday. And when we're going to get to in a minute, when the Jews were kicked out of the old city, it was Shabbat in a few hours. He says, it's Friday. Shabbat is tonight. And I know all the Jews are going to be asking me questions of halakha. They're not going to know what to do. So I'm reviewing the halachot so I know what to tell them. And Abdullah Atal was so impressed with this. And he said, I want you to give me a blessing. Could you imagine the irony? He's killing all the Jews and he tells this rabbi, I want a blessing. He says, okay, I'll give you a blessing only on the condition that you don't injure a single Jew. Otherwise, it won't come true what I tell you. And he says, okay. And then we have Moshe Rusnak over here. He's signing the forms of surrender. And originally, they wanted to do some negotiation. The Jordanians said, no negotiation. You surrender. You give us all your weapons. And we won't kill you in return. We get control of the old city. And another thing also that happened throughout this, it's a 2-week period. That's terrible. 2-week period from the signing the declaration of the state until the Rova fell is one of the promises, we're going to help you. They said, we're going to give you help by air. We're going to have a plane drop you ammunition. And the Jews are all ready. They spread out an area. They even lighted bonfires so the plane could identify where. And the plane drops supplies to the wrong side, drops it to the Arabs, and the Arabs get all of it. So anyway, Moshe Rusnak is signing the surrender, and with a heavy heart, he decides, this is what I'm going to do. Despite everyone outside saying, do not surrender, do not surrender. And then a very interesting thing happens. Abdullah tells them, okay, we want everyone out of shuls, standing up in lines. We want to see who's here. All the fighters stand. And he's expecting to see hundreds of fighters. 30 men are standing there that are soldiers that are fighting. And he looks at it and he can't believe it. He goes, this is all you are? You're only 30 people and you cause this crazy amount of casualties? And he says, if I knew that this is all you were, I would have came at you with sticks. Like, this is what you are? And this is him over here in the middle. And later on, he writes that the Jews defended the old city in ways that were unimaginable. He could not believe that they were surviving for this long. Here is a picture of the Jews getting ready to leave the old city. Some of you might recognize this building. We're going to see it in its modern day form in a little while. And it's very sad picture. All the Jews, they're given an hour to collect their belongings. They don't know where they're going to go, and it's Friday. They don't know what to take. How many belongings do they even have? Because they were all huddled together in shul. And you could imagine, to think about what was going through their mind is very traumatic. And what are the Arabs doing in the meantime? Looting. They're going into the Jews' houses, helping themselves to whatever property they want. And the Zion Gate, Shad Zion, which 10 days earlier, the Palmach fighters entered and left. Now the Jews are leaving through the very same gate. And here's a very famous picture. The Jews leave, and no Jew sets foot in the old city for the next 19 years. That's it, closed, done. Now what? Now what? So what happens to the Jews? Wait, another thing I want to add. When Abdullah sees how few Jews there are, fighters, that there's only 30, he says, I can only take 30 people into captivity. That's not enough. So he ends up taking more men that have nothing to do with the fighting. The youngest is 15 and the oldest is an 82-year-old man, and he doesn't really have to go, but this man actually wants to go, and he's bringing his sidur with him and his talit, and the Jews are telling him, the younger ones, don't come, maybe you don't understand what's happening. And he says, I understand, but you guys protected me for so long, and I have the zechut of Talmud Torah, that now it's my turn to protect you. So the Jews are taken captive to Jordan for 19 months, about 280 people, and only 30 of them were actual fighters. 2 women went as well that were nurses because they wanted to try to help the wounded. And what's the reaction? The war is over. Now they're coming back to Israel. They're not in Jordan anymore. So they were really degraded by the rest of the nation. It's similar to when Holocaust survivors, the Holocaust is over and they're in Israel. They didn't talk about their experiences because the Jews that weren't in it couldn't understand and said, what do you mean you didn't fight back? You just did nothing? So Holocaust survivors for many years didn't speak about it. And the Jews here that were put their lives on the line, put their heart and soul into fighting and defending the old city. Yes, they surrendered. And the Jews, other Jews do not respect them because as far as they're concerned, you tarnished our image. We are proud Israelis. We don't ever give up. And you guys just surrendered. And this is how the Jews feel that, and we know the story of the conditions they were fighting, and they did everything they could. Now here is Moshe Rusnak that we saw earlier. This man he's smiling in the picture, but for 19 years, he's living with the biggest guilt. Every day he needs someone to tell him, it's not your fault, it's not your fault, it's not your fault. You did the best you can. And he has this guilt on his shoulders. I surrendered. Was it the right thing? Was it not? This is how he's living for 19 years until Jerusalem is reconquered in 1967. Now, I will say that there were corrections done to this because in 2005, Moshe Rusnak was awarded the Worthy of Jerusalem Prize because the people, after learning the history, realized he did everything that he could. And now this prize you could only get if you're 65 and older, and is given to someone that showed a lifetime of commitment and contribution to Jerusalem. And I'm sure you've passed this stone tons of times, but you never noticed it, but you will notice it now when you go to the old city. Right when you come down the steps that near the Roman pillars, the Cardo, you'll see this stone. And this is in honor of Moshe Rusnak. The people recognized, you know what? He deserves honor. He shouldn't feel guilty. He did an amazing job. He didn't want it. He was 24 years old and they forced him to take command. And also the situation with the Jews that weren't given respect was rectified. And the Jews of the old city who fought were recognized with something known as the Ot HaKomenut. Now, a few other points I want to touch on. Normally, when the Jews in the old city died, they were taken outside of the city to be buried, but they can't leave the city now. They're stuck inside. So the rabbis decided a temporary burial spot inside the old city, and they just buried them all together. And you see on the wall, here were buried the people. 34 Jews were buried there, and later on when the Jordanians completely took over. They put another 14 bodies there, and they were buried like this. Now, Moshe Rusnak, he took very, very detailed and careful notes about who was buried there. And then in 1967, when we got control again, with God's kindness of the old city, and we went in, so we knew where they were buried, and we had the list of who was buried, and Moshe, because of Moshe Rusnak's copy. Now, this is what it looks like today. There's no bodies underneath because the bodies were all taken to Har HaZitim, and it's, I think, really beautiful and symbolic. It fell, but now they're buried in the place overlooking it. So now we have a memorial in honor of them, of 48 soldiers. And I want to spend a few minutes talking about one of the soldiers. A fun fact to know is the Israeli army's youngest soldier in history was 10 years old. So this is a picture of a boy named Nisim Gini. And we mentioned that children needed to help as well, because the children could run from post to post. They could bring food and water to the soldiers. They could pass messages along. He was actually even younger than 10 when he died. He was 9 years and 9 months. And as the story goes, he was home with his mother, who was blind, and he had a sister as well, and he's eating a meal. And he tells his mother, "Ma, I have a feeling this is going to be my last meal." And she says, "Nonsense, what are you talking about?" Then they hear a knock on the door, and a soldier comes, and they say, "Nisim, can you please come help? Because we're supposed to have a different young boy running from post to post, but he didn't show up. We need you. Could you come?" And his mom says, "Could he at least finish eating?" And Nisim says, "No, Ma, I can't finish. They need my help. Let me go." And he goes to help, and he's shot, or like injured from something that exploded. And his sister, who was a few years older than him, was a volunteer in the temporary hospital, tried to save his life and couldn't. And he was in this mass grave. Now, he is the one body that they knew with 100% would belong to. Why? Because they saw his baby teeth. So they said, if there's baby teeth, then it has to be from the only person who was still a baby, who didn't have his adult teeth, all his adult teeth yet, all of his adult teeth. Yeah. So that's the story of Nisim Gini, one of many. Every single fighter here has a story as well, but he was the youngest one. He's buried on Har HaZitim. I want to point out sites that have to do with the story that you could see in the old city. So you could see this memorial. You might have even passed it a few times. If not, it's something that's definitely worth it to go and visit, now that you know the story especially. Also, just sit somewhere and you need to relax, or if it's freezing and you need to get away, they have this really beautiful room that's air conditioned in the summer. I was there yesterday, and what they have in there is this 14-minute video that's called Levad al Chomot, where you have people that fought in the old city, Moshe Rusnak being one of them, talking. Now, 95% of the information I shared with you today, I learned from this video, which I actually watched on YouTube, a much longer version, a 37-minute version. And it's really powerful to have the people share their experiences with you. And there's pictures on the wall of some of the things that are happening. And also in back, so here are the benches you sit on, a very comfortable room. On the back, on these bricks, are the names of the 48 fighters that fell. So that's something really nice. It's a nice thing, corner to know, especially knowing the history. It gives you more of an appreciation for where you're walking today. I'm not going to leave you on such a sad note of death and destruction and that Rova fell, because we know we have Yom Yerushalayim coming up in a few days. In 1967, the paratroopers, among other soldiers, went into Sha'ar HaArayot, Lion's Gate, and got control of the old city. And we have the famous line, Har HaBayit Beyadenu, the Temple Mount is in our hands. And we have the beautiful Jerusalem that we started with today, that we all love, that we can walk in and enjoy and love. And knowing how we got there, all of a sudden, wow, look where we are. I think it makes the experience more powerful. Something else I want to show you. So where is this memorial found? There is this school, and there's always kids playing in the yard. So it's actually a boys' school. I was shocked that I saw a picture of girls playing soccer. There's always boys, but girls could play too. right near the school with the children is this memorial. And one of the reasons that they liked that this was there, because they could have moved the memorial anywhere. I mean, yes, it's meaningful that they did it in a place where the bodies were, but they could have moved it. But they said we wanted here because in a place that we're remembering the soldiers that and fighters that, not only soldiers, the people that gave their lives, all of a sudden we have a school with children that's full of life, and the contrast is just so beautiful. And also nearby is a very beautiful pasuk from Sefer Zechariah, where Hashem says, "Od yeshavu zekenim uzkenot b'rchavot Yerushalayim." Old people, old men, old women are going to once again sit in the streets. V'ish mishanto beyado berov yamim, and a man with his cane from a lot of days. I forgot to put the next pasuk, which I like even better. The next pasuk says that children are going to fill the streets playing. And back then, when it was written, the destruction of the temples, the Jews certainly couldn't imagine it. And I would imagine in 1948, when the Jews are sadly leaving the old city, never knowing when they're going to return again, they couldn't even imagine. But it came true. Now, this picture over here, I asked you if anyone, well, I asked you rhetorically because I can't hear, if anyone recognizes this. So the Jews, when they were all gathered and said, you have an hour, get all your belongings together. So you notice that this is the same building. This is called Kikad Batei Machaseh. What it used to be was houses for poor people. Now the top floor has office buildings and the bottom floor is a school. And here are the boys that I was talking about playing soccer. And if you see where this pillar is, if you go right behind the pillar, there's an alleyway, and that's where you get to the memorial. So it's just so amazing. You have years ago in 1948, the Jews crying, leaving, not believing that this is real. And today you have children happily playing along. I'd like to summarize. We spoke about a lot today. We opened the class with the beautiful Jerusalem and the Rova and saw how amazing it is today. And we said, this wasn't always the case. And we know it's not only the case. This wasn't always the case because we're celebrating Jerusalem Day that we got it. So what happened before? And in 1948, the Rova fell. We didn't win, and we're not used to that because we used to always winning. If you Google the video that I watched, which you totally can, Levad al Chomot, so you have Moshe Rusnak, he's standing right in front of the school with the children, right in front of here, and you see little kids coming up to him and they're saying, who are you? And he says, I was the head of all the Jews fighting, and the kids were all impressed that, wow, we're talking to the head. And they said, did you win? He said, no. What do you mean you didn't win? Because we're used to winning. So how did the Rova fall? So we said it started with the Arabs attacking right after the UN said that there is going to be a state of Israel, and we discussed the challenges of fighting there, how narrow it is, how small it is, houses all on top of each other, not enough weapons, not enough medicine, not enough people. The Palmach enter and leave, which gave tremendous hope to the Jews, and then they leave. So all their hope was taken away. And slowly, as their strength is waning, they all gather together in the four Sephardic shuls. It's this clump together. They surrender, and Moshe Rusnak signs it. And then for years, he feels guilty over what he did, but it wasn't really his fault. How could he do otherwise? And he at least said, you know what? We're going to die if we continue this way. Let me at least save their lives. And because of him, these Jews were alive and raised families, him as well. They were taken into captivity. We spoke about the disrespect they were met with after when they came back. The guilt that Moshe felt, it was rectified eventually. And as the Jews also that were all embarrassed and not given the proper respect, that was also rectified. We mentioned a few places you could visit is the movie room. It's very meaningful to watch the movie. Plus, it's a nice break to get in the heat. It's free. And the Gal Ed Memorial for the 48 people that fell. We mentioned Nisim Gini was the youngest soldier. And the 6-Day War, to end it on a happy note. It's funny that a war is a happy note, but it is because we got Jerusalem back. One of the questions we asked was, how can we increase our love and appreciation for Jerusalem, for the people that protected it? I hope this Zoom learning about the fall of the Rova, the Jewish quarter, increased your love for Israel and appreciation for the people that protect it. And the people that protect it are not only the soldiers, it's also you. Because with your tefillah and love and care for the people that live in Israel and for Israel in general. And even just coming to this Zoom, learning about Eretz Yisrael shows that you care. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees wherever you are, wherever the Jewish people are, how much they care. So know that you're also playing a part in the protection of Eretz Yisrael. Thank you so much for being here. I wish you a very happy Yom Yerushalayim, and I can't wait to see you all in Israel soon, now that things are opening up more.
Thank you so much, Adele.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was great. Great job.
I knew now and how short I prepared it because I texted you at 2:00.
It did not seem like that at all.
Was it like good enough of information? Because I didn't want to overload. Like I wanted it to be.
Yeah, no, definitely was. It's a totally different perspective on 67. You know what I'm saying? You were talking about, 48, and it's interesting how it because no one realizes that.
Right.
You know, I'm reading that book. What's that?
What book are you reading?
That Prime Minister's book.
Right.
So I know how much, Begin was so angry that in 48 they let the old city go without much of a fight, and it stung him till forever, until 67.